What's up, everybody? My name is Jared Ewing, and you are tuning into another episode of Final Cut Pro Help Live. We have a very exciting day today as far as our content goes, so I've been waiting for today for a little bit and prepping. We have some really good stuff to show you today. And what I want to know from everyone that's listening is, what is your feedback on the show? So at the end of the show, take a little brief second to go over and send an email to finalcutprohelp@me.com with any feedback that you have. You can also go and leave a comment on this stream. Whether you want to do that live right now, you can, or you can go and send an email that's a little bit more private. If you're following at Final Cut Pro Help on Instagram, you can always send me a direct message there. Whatever way you want to get a hold of me, just leave in your comments. Feedback, whether it's good or bad, I'm open to all of that. So I'll be reminding you of that at the end of the show. But again, don't hesitate to leave a comment. Let me know that you're here. So let's dive into it. We're going to start off with a little presentation. I'm going to show you some demos, specifically around creating some content with Instagram, and then we're going to go into a Q&A section at the end. So if you do have questions, leave them in the YouTube live stream chat right now if you're watching this live. If you're watching this on a replay later, you can also do that. Just leave a comment, and I will do my best to reply to all those. If you don't get a reply after a few days, don't hesitate. Send me another email or something else. Reach out to me. But let's get the show going. This is episode 11 of Final Cut Pro Help Live. And like I said, we're going to be creating content and sharing it to Instagram. I'm going to show you not necessarily how to create the actual content of what you're shooting, because everyone's going to be different, but I'm going to show you some best practices, how to set up your project, what to do while you're editing, little things to consider, and then at the end, how to share that project and actually get it onto Instagram in a relatively good quality. I'm going to talk a lot about quality because I get a lot of questions around that topic. So that's kind of the summary of what we're going to do. Again, creating the project. We're going to edit it for Instagram. I'm going to give you some tips. And then at the end, we're going to end with a Q&A section. So definitely stick around for that part. There's going to be some good questions answered, some things there that I think are pretty good. So all the information that I give you, too, just as a reminder, is from my own experience. I mean, this is knowledge that I've collected over the years, and I want to pass on to you. But it's also based on feedback that I've received over the many years that I've been both teaching and supporting Final Cut and that community. But it's not necessarily the best way to do things. I try to find the best way, but there's always people out there that have a better workflow or believe that they have something that is much better than the way people are doing it now. So if you are one of those, if you have something, you're looking at what I'm doing and you're saying, no, that's not the best way to do it, please let me know. Put it in the comments below. Let everyone that's watching know, because we want to find and make the best content we can. So if someone's doing something wrong, or maybe there's an easier way to do something, pass it along. Don't hesitate. We want our community here, Final Cut people, to be nice and strong. So that's the way to do that. But so who am I? So my name is Jared Ewing, and I've gotten this question from a couple people because I don't usually talk about myself, and you're here for the content, but I did want to just kind of give you a reason of why you're listening to me and why you should actually listen to my comments, why it's something you want to do. So this is just a reason to keep watching. So my name is Jared Ewing. I grew up and went to school in Chicago. I studied video production with a concentration in post-production. So I started out learning everything about production, from storyboarding, scripting, shooting, editing. I learned the whole process, but I found that post-production and editing was one of my favorite things. So I've gone through and I've shot and edited just about all different formats, from music videos to short films, weddings, event videos, and corporate work. So whole bunch of stuff. But after Chicago, I moved to Los Angeles, and I've been continuing my production work here. I've also found a passion for the outdoors, whether it's snowboarding up in Mammoth, this was earlier this year, or if I'm going out hiking. I just didn't do much hiking in the Midwest, but out here there's some great places like Yosemite, or just in the back trails here in Los Angeles. So that's where you can find me, and some of the things that I'm doing. In most of those activities, I'm capturing video that I would then shoot and edit and post, mostly for myself, just little things, but that's the type of content that I'm working with. So that's what I do kind of on a personal level and moving out. Most of the time, you're going to find me editing with Final Cut Pro, as you expect from this channel. But I've also used Adobe Premiere, DaVinci Resolve, which is the newer editor, Avid's Media Composer. I've used a ton of different editing applications. I'm an Apple certified Final Cut Studio Master Pro and a certified hardware technician. And so what does all this mean? It's simple. I'm trained in video production, a master of Final Cut, a longtime teacher, and a hardware technician. So I can both teach you the stuff, I can also fix your stuff when it breaks. So don't hesitate. You can leave a comment with anything related to the knowledge that I have, and I'll do my best to get back to you and answer those questions. And like I've said, you can reach out to me directly. A lot of people are hesitant because whatever question they're going to ask they think is a dumb question or like a stupid problem and they can do it some other way. But I can tell you there's no such thing. Most of the time, if you're thinking that, it's actually a really good question. So send those any way you want, especially through email, finalcutprohelp@me.com. All right, enough about me. Let's get into what this is about, which is Instagram. So what settings should you use? Well, if you're going to create a new project, you're going to see a window that looks like this. This you just get to by going to File, New Project. In the lower left corner, you can click on Use Manual Settings. That's what will show all of these additional fields. And there's a couple things to know. First, you should always name your project. I have so many people that come to me and the project name is untitled. It's the default name. And trust me, just for organization, it helps to have them named, but also for troubleshooting. When we have a problem, if something's called untitled, I have to keep referencing it as untitled, and it can get very messy. And chances are you're going to have more than one project. So first tip, name your projects. Now, moving on, we're going to save it into an event. And then our big thing we want to look at here is the actual format. So if we're talking about Instagram, and that's what we're going to be doing here, and specifically we're talking about standard Instagram posts. So not stories, not IGTV as much. We're going to be focusing on your primary posts. The video resolution right now has a maximum of 1080 for the width. Instagram doesn't really care about the 1920 part as far as the other resolution. So 1080 is our key number here. We want to have that there. Frame rate, about 30 frames per second is what Instagram goes up to. You can change this. You can make it higher. You can make it lower, but you don't necessarily get any benefit by going above or below, except maybe some visual stylized looks if you want to do that. But 30 frames is usually the standard for Instagram. So those are the settings that you have to worry about. And then what about actually editing? What are some tips or some things to consider? Well, the biggest one is the length of your video. How long is it going to be? Instagram right now limits on your video posts are 60 seconds. So you have 1 minute to tell whatever story you want to tell. So that's a key. If you try to upload and you're getting failed results for some reason, if your video is 1 minute and a couple frames or 2 minutes long, it's too long, that's going to give you issues. So we want to consider the video length before we create. The other thing I recommend considering is the first frame of your video. When you're scrolling through Instagram videos, a lot of times they autoplay, but sometimes they might show up in a batch where they're all the little thumbnails. The first frame of your video is what's going to be presented to the people that might go in and tap on your videos. So if your first frame is black because you have a fade in to start your video, well, then it's just going to be a black square, and that's not too inviting to people that want to watch. So in your Final Cut Pro project, you can actually set up the first frame of your video to be something enticing. It might have a title. It might have something else on it. If you look at the Instagram feed for Final Cut Pro Help, which is just instagram.com/Final Cut Pro Help, you can scroll through, and some of the recent posts, you'll see if you don't play any of them, if you just look at them, it shows what the shortcut is and what the app is that you're going to be watching. So that way, when you look at it without even playing the video, you know, okay, this is going to be a Final Cut shortcut, or this is going to be a motion shortcut. Then when you tap on that video, it goes from that first frame to the rest of the content. So that's another thing to consider. And then one of the biggest things is to consider how compression factors into all of this. because that's the top question I get. The quality of the video is just not there. So we're going to want to look at compression, and we're going to do a little bit of that in this video here, just after we get into the or when we get into the demo. And then again, for stories and IGTV, that's not what this stream is going to be about. We want to focus more on the actual content that's staying and remaining on Instagram. But for stories and for IGTV, you'll want to switch your resolutions because it is vertical video. So that does take a different mindset. And there are other videos on this channel, on the Final Cut Pro Help YouTube page, that go over working with vertical video. And that's what you're going to do for IGTV and stories. For all of this, regardless of where the post is, you want to consider the placement of the items you're going to add on Instagram. So if you think of stickers, or if you're going to put a Q&A sticker onto the page somewhere, you want to consider that when you're building the movie and the video in Final Cut, so that when you move over to Instagram, you have a place where you can put those items. So consider all those placements. And then my biggest tip is to create a template project that you can then reuse over and over again. And there's a previous Final Cut Pro Help live stream all about creating template projects. I would recommend watching that to learn how to create a reusable template project so that you don't have to start from scratch every single time you want to create a new Instagram post. So that's editing, but what about sharing? So when you go to share your project, you do want to look at the settings that you're sharing out. And the most common problem is that people share a video out at a lower resolution or lower quality, and then they send it over to their phone, even in a lower quality, maybe through email or another source. And all of these steps are lowering the quality of your video. So when you share, which we're going to see in the demo, you're going to share it a full quality video. And then you can send it to your phone either by airdropping it or syncing it through iTunes if it's an iPhone. If it's not an iPhone, you can use an app like Android Sync or the apps that came with your phone, but you want to manually sync that full quality version over there. You don't want to use apps that compress the video and make it smaller. So just make sure you're using an app that gets that full quality version over. So then another option that you can use, because you can either use the Instagram app natively on your device, but some people are using apps and other websites to publish their content. Things like Later, and there's a bunch of other services that you can use that will schedule your posts for you, which is really nice, but you want to check with those sites and see what they need to be able to upload those videos. Some of those sites actually need you to send up a lower quality video or a file that's under 500 megabytes or different requirements. So for those sites, go to their support page and look for a document that tells you exactly the size that you're going to be uploading at. And then my final tip for sharing is just test, test, test. You want to make sure that this is all going to work for you. So just keep on testing the content and sharing it over and refining your workflow. As you get better at this, as you share more, you'll see what things work and what things don't work. So always test this stuff out. So enough of me blabbering on. Let's go into a demo, and we're actually going to see this inside of Final Cut here live. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. If we have some glitches, though, that's what Final Cut usually handles pretty well, but that's a good thing because you might run into those as well. So let me exit out of our little keynote here, and we're going to dive in. Again, any questions you have, or if you just want to say hi in the chat on the live stream here if you're watching live, please do, and I will try to answer all those things, but I always appreciate the little shout-outs letting me know you are watching and you are here. So here we are inside of Final Cut Pro 10. The first thing, if you have any other different view or different layout to your stuff here, just press Command-0 on your keyboard. Use that shortcut to go back to the default layout, which is what we're seeing here. You'll see the inspector on the right, the timelines at the bottom. We have our viewer showing the video, and then on the left column, we have our browser. So that's where we're going to start. We need to create a new project. And I will talk about converting an existing project. But in our new project here, I'm going to go up to File, New Project. Again, you can do Command-N as well as the shortcut for creating a new project. And then this is where we're going to name it. So definitely always give it a name. If you don't do a name, it's just going to be called Untitled, and that's not organized. So I'm going to go and give it a name. We're just going to call it Instagram. It's going to go into the event, which is just called Stock Media. And I'm going to click on Use Custom Settings. And use custom settings is a big one because this gives you all those additional settings and what you're actually going to use for creating this project. So there's a couple variations that you might use, but the biggest thing to look at is our video format. And almost always I recommend using a 1080p HD project. If you use a 720p or a smaller number than 1080, then you are essentially lowering the quality right there, and everything you have going forward is going to be lower quality. If all the video you're using is 720p video, then there's not a huge benefit to doing 1080. But if it's all 1080 video or maybe 4K video and you use a 720p project, you're just lowering that quality. So that's my first recommendation. I always recommend using a 1080p HD project. Then our resolution here, we can use 1920 by 1080 because the important number is the one on the right here, the 1080. But you can also go in here and use a square project, which we don't see a 1080 by 1080. Or if you are creating for IGTV, you would actually use a 1080 by 1920 project. And that's just not an option right now in Final Cut. So in that case, you're going to go over to your format and change it to a custom format. This allows you to type in a custom resolution. So if I wanted it to be a square Instagram post, I can do 1080 by 1080, which I'm going to do in this case. If I did want it to be vertical video, I would do 1080 by 1920. And then like I mentioned earlier in the keynote, we do have our frame rate. So for our frame rate, we're going to change this, and I'm going to just change it to a 30p project. You can also do 2997 if that's what you shot the frame rate at. Either one of these, though, for Instagram purposes should be fine. After we do that, the rest of the content here I'm going to keep the same, and I'm going to say OK to create that project. So now, looking down on our timeline here, we have an empty timeline, but if we look up in the viewer, you can see it's a square video. That's what this black square is. It's letting us know what size is being used there. So that's a great start, and now if you're going to edit this video, it's specifically for Instagram, you can go through and edit it. So what I'm actually going to do, because I got this as a question over, I believe it was through Instagram, it might have been reached out a different way, but they shared a video with me, and they said, I want to recreate what's happening in this video. And this was an Instagram post, and we're actually going to look at this video as an example, because I want to show you how to build some of this content. So I'm going to show you two examples here of videos that can be created with Instagram. And these are all from the Dan Lok Instagram page. I don't endorse any of what he's saying or approve it or anything like that. This is just an example that came to me, and I want to use it as to show you and to give you an example of something, because I like what he does with his videos and some of his content. There's some things that could be refined and could be a little bit better, but this is a good example. And you should always be looking at other people's content, because it's one of the best ways to learn, because you'll see something they do, and then you'll want to go out and do it yourself as well. So here is one of the videos, and I'm going to show you two different examples. Here's one of them. And if I go back to the beginning of this video, here's our first frame, right? Notice where he's positioned, the title at the top, the little status bar at the bottom, this like gold-looking thing. This is what he set as the first frame of the video. And then if I go a couple frames into the video after playing it, you'll notice it jumps to a different screen here. So that's what I said earlier, is you want to have a frame at the beginning of your video that's how you want your video represented to others when they're looking on Instagram. And then let's just play through the rest of this video, because there's only a few elements, right? We have the video in the middle. It is a square project. It's got the white background. There's some big title at the top, and then we move this out of the way. At the bottom, we can see the various things that he's talking about. So that way, if you're watching this video without the sound, like we are now, you can still see and follow what he's talking about there. A couple things I don't like about the video is we have jump cuts like this where the color is really washed out in the background. Color's not really that great here. We have a weird white line on the right side, but not the left side. So there's a lot of little things that were kind of an oversight for this video. But you can see as we're playing through the video, we have a little progress bar going across the bottom. So that way, if you are watching it, it's a nice indicator to understand where you are in the video. And all this is pretty straightforward for creating, and we're going to do that in just a minute inside of Final Cut. And then another thing he does, he has some graphics here and there. And then let me bring up his other video here that I captured. This is another one, very similar. Let's put them side by side. Very similar. You can see a black background, the same little status bar at the bottom. We have a frame at the beginning that's different from his actual starting frame. It jumps there because he just wants to make sure that the first frame is nice. He's got his logo in the corner with the Instagram logo and the @ sign, so you know who he is, how to get a hold of him. And if we scrub through it, cutting back and forth between two video clips, so that way he doesn't have to memorize the whole script. He can just edit it together with those clips. He looks like he's even reading down on the script there. I don't know if he has it. Yeah, he must have something below it. But that's what we're trying to create here, right? We're trying to create stuff that can be shared onto Instagram. So those are some examples and what we're going to go through and create here. So to do it, I've marked a clip as favorite. I'm going to hold Option and click on this green circle at the top left just to expand Final Cut to fill the window. But I'm going to change to my favorite clips because I actually have marked a clip as a favorite that I want to use, that I want to share over to Instagram. It's very simple. It's just a clip of me running down a hill at Griffith here, so we're going to do that. I'm going to hit this button on the toolbar to turn off audio skimming so it doesn't play all the audio in my ear. I don't think you guys can hear that, but just in my ear. So I just drag that clip down onto the timeline, onto the project. I'm going to hit Shift-Z while the timeline is active here to fit the video so I can see the whole length of the video. And just in doing that, we can see a couple things have happened. With the video selected, I can see the inspector for that video. And there's this feature here called Spatial Conform. And on the right, just hit the little show button. You'll see the Spatial Conform. The Spatial Conform right now is set to fit. And you can change this from fit to fill to none. And what fit means is we're going to fit the entire video inside of this frame here. So as I'm scrubbing through the video, we're seeing the entire 1920 by 1080 frame or resolution of that clip. This may have been a 4K clip, but either way, we're seeing the entire frame there. And even though it's going to show black at the top and the bottom, this is showing the entire thing because Spatial Conform is set to fit. If we change this to fill, notice it zooms in on the clip so that it fills the entire area of our video, which may also be okay. This clip is actually set up fairly okay for the primary spot where I run past the camera, which is okay. But if you don't want that, just change this to fit. It'll fit the entire thing in our window there. So that's one little tip, is just the Spatial Conform section. So looking ahead, we looked at a final post and we kind of have an idea of what we want to create. We're going to create the little bar at the bottom. We're going to put text at the bottom and the top. We're going to get a little logo, maybe our Instagram handle to put onto the video itself. So what we have here is a nice layout with the video. And the next thing we're going to do is start putting some of those icons onto the screen. So to do that, I'm going to use the text, the titles and generator sidebar here to create some text. So just go up and click on that titles and generator sidebar. We're going to go into titles. And then you can either click on titles or select one of the categories to find one. I'm just going to use the basic title in this case. But you could use any of these titles. But the point of this video is not really to learn too much about actually using the title tool. I want to just more show the layout part of it. So that's what we're going to use here. So I've added the title. I do want this text to go the entire length of the project. So I'm going to drag from left and right to extend that title. And then with the title selected, you can go onto the viewer here and use the transform tool, which is in the lower left corner, to adjust this. If you don't see the transform tool, just push and hold this little drop down because you might be set on crop or on a different tool like distort. So you can just change that over to transform. And transform is simple. It just allows you to move the placement of this text here. So I'm going to put on my Instagram handle, and just like you did in the video, I'm going to put it in the lower left corner of the video. And actually, maybe you want to do it down here. You can experiment with these different placements to see what looks good there. So I'm actually going to do it so it's on the black background, so it stands out a little bit. And I'm going to put it a little bit to the right so it's not on the edge of the screen. And then to change the text, I can just double click right here in the viewer, or I can go into our inspector here and type up in the inspector. Either spot, whatever is easier for you. Just go in and type in the text that you want to show. So in this case, it's going to be the Instagram handle So I'm going to just say at Final Cut Pro Help. Obviously, I put in some new text there, so now the placement is not where I want it. So again, I'm going to select the title, and I'm going to use the Transform tool here to move that over so it's not cut off on the edge. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. If you want, you can go through and select the font, change various things about that. Maybe you want to go down here to face. You can hit Show on the right to change the color of that text. You have that option. Everything is available for you. So maybe you want to use the cyan color. I can go and do that. We have that option. So cool. So that's the adding text onto the screen for the handle. If the size is not where you want it, you can use the Transform tool to adjust the size. But for titles and text, I usually recommend going over and actually changing the size of that font. I just find rendering and the quality tends to be a little bit better when it comes to fonts if you do it through the font inspector here and not just using the Transform tool. So that's one layer of the title. Looks pretty good. Now I want to add the title on the top and the bottom. So we're going to have a title that just stays the entire time at the top, and then we're going to have text changing throughout the bottom. For this video, there's not any narration or audio happening, so we don't really need it, but just so you can see what this looks like. So again, I'm going to drag the basic title down to the bottom. I can extend the length of this title from left to right with it selected. Maybe I'll put in the text this time. So maybe this is just a title at the top. I could go and change the font, the size, all of those various things. I have the Transform tool already activated, so I'll just drag that up to the top. Looks pretty good. On the timeline, I can just hold the Option and drag this text up. And by doing that Option dragging, it actually makes a copy of it. So instead of having to redo the font selection, the size, and everything, I could just do it that way. Maybe this is going to be a little bit smaller because it's going to be two different sizes. So I can go down here. Maybe we want to do our YouTube channel name so they can see the link. And you can promote whatever content you're trying to promote or send out, and then we'll readjust the position of that. One little side note about the viewer. If you go up to the View menu at the top right corner, we can click on View, and there's this option to show the title and action safe zones. The title and action safe zones are these little lines which you may not see across the stream, but if you go into Final Cut and enable them, you'll be able to see them. And what those are is simply guides for where you should put text, which is the inner line, and the outer line is for action. So that's standard guides when you were talking about publishing for TV screens and other areas. However, for Instagram posts, that's where these guides are less relevant, because almost always when you're scrolling through Instagram, you are going to see the entire screen. So we can be less worried about text getting cut off. With that said, though, it is good to keep a little bit of a buffer around the edge, because when you have text that's butted up right against the edge of a screen, say like the Y here in YouTube, it's right up against the edge now. When you have that, it just looks odd. It looks kind of strange, and a lot of people can't place why it is. It's because you're right on the edge. It's almost like you're trying to pull it from falling off. So don't do that. Make sure you adjust these things and make it look nice. Have the placement of things be something you actually want. Cool. So in this case, I know the next thing that we're going to add is our little progress bar at the bottom that's going to be extending and growing the entire length. If we go back over to QuickTime here, that's this kind of gold bar that as I scrub through the video is expanding the length of it. And this just tells people roughly where they are in the video. So if they're thinking about turning it off, they can look at this bar and they're like, oh no, I'm almost to the end of the video. Even though you're still 2/3, 20 seconds away, that little indicator can help keep people engaged in your content and watching instead of turning it off. So how can you create that? You can certainly go out and purchase a template and plugin or something like that, but it's actually pretty easy to do it here inside of Final Cut Pro. So let's do that. What I'm going to do is in the Titles and Generators sidebar, I'm going to go to the Generators category, and you can go through and look at backgrounds and some other things, but in this case, I just want it to be a solid color. So you could choose one. I'm actually going to choose Custom, and I'm going to drag this down onto the project. And again, just like the previous project, I can drag it out to the length that I want that clip to be. So I'm going to drag it all the way in a second, but I want to drag it out halfway just to show you something. So right now, notice the black background here is covering up the entire page. That's obviously not what we want. So I'm going to go into the video inspector, go down to crop, and I'm going to crop the top of this clip because we just want it right at the bottom. So I'm going to crop it down to about here. Notice I'm looking in the viewer for this. This is very hard to see because it's black on black. So I'm going to go over to the generators inspector, click on color, because again, we can select a custom color. At the bottom of the color window wheel here, I'll just drag my brightness up, and you can see in the background there, it's changing to white. If I want to have my saved colors down here, I could click on a saved color. Maybe we want to try out a yellow, or more, maybe we want a little bit gold. We can adjust that. I can go and select the crayon view. Maybe you want to see these at a specific crayon color. I could do that. Let's try banana. No, let's go tangerine. Let's do that kind of ugly orange there. That's fine. And I'm going to go back to the video inspector. And now we're going to add keyframes. If you've done anything in video editing, you may have heard the term keyframes thrown out there. So that's what we're going to do. Essentially, what we want to keyframe is the position of the crop. So notice if I adjust the right crop parameter, I can make that bar there grow across the video, just like we were seeing in the other example. And let me switch back, just like we're seeing down here with this gold bar, right? It's growing up as we go across the video. So that's what we're going to do by adding keyframes to the right crop parameter. Say that 100 times fast. So let's do that. So for keyframing, it's very important that you start by placing your playhead where you want it to be. So I'm going to go to the beginning of this project. And at the beginning, I'm going to have the crop be so that the bar is barely visible, right about there. And then to add a keyframe, you just press this little diamond button. This is the Add Keyframe button. So you click on that, and notice it goes gold instead of being empty. That lets us know right at this moment in time, which is at 0000, right at 0 seconds at the beginning of the project, make sure that the right crop parameter is at 1058. So that looks good. So I'm going to go to the end of this little clip here, and I'm going to extend the crop parameter. And actually, if I go all the way to the end, I don't see it anymore. So I'm going to use the back arrow on my keyboard to go back one frame, and now we can see it there. And now I can adjust the parameter. And notice I'm not adding a keyframe first. I know there's already one there because of this little symbol. So I can actually just adjust this crop parameter, and we'll adjust it all the way out to 0. So it goes right on the edge. And you'll see on the right side here, we get that gold keyframe is listed. It's added that automatically because we had already added one before. Right, so that's the key, and what a lot of people get confused with keyframing is you got to add it at the correct time. So what does this look like then? If we go back to the beginning, I'm gonna mute my speakers here. We don't need the sound coming through. Oh, I have it set. That's fine. And we'll play this and we'll see it. So notice it's slowly creeping along. Let me fast forward through this, and you can see that bar grows over time, right? So that's how you can create that little progress bar at the bottom. Very simple. You just add your color or any other picture. You could have this be a design, a graphic, something else, and then you can just crop it and animate the crop parameter using the keyframes. Cool. So that looks pretty good. We've kind of set up what we want our video to be, and I'm pretty happy with the way that looks. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is we got to consider the length of the video. Some of you have probably noticed that this project is over 5 minutes long. It's 5 minutes and 11 seconds. So way too long. Instagram only allows us to go up to about a minute. So we want to keep it under 1 minute long, which is way over here. So as I'm scrubbing through this video, if we get to about the center part here, that's when I run by the camera, and that's actually the primary content that I want to keep for this video. So that's the part that we're going to use. So I'm actually going to, at the end of after I run past the camera and the smoke kind of settles a little bit, I'm going to hit the B key for blade. That activates my razor blade tool. I'm going to click on the clip. Then I'm going to switch back to the arrow tool, select this part, and delete it because I know we don't want that. And that's how you can trim a clip really easily. Another way you can trim the clip, instead of switching back and forth between the tools, I'm going to press the B key again. Again, this is B as in boy. I'm going to press the B key and I'm going to hold the button down. I'm not actually going to let go of it. So I'm just pressing the B key. It activates the blade tool. I can then click to cut the clip. And when I let go of the B key, it switches back to the arrow tool. So that's another little tiny tip, but that's how you can temporarily activate a tool, which is kind of a cool feature there. So that cut my tool. I'm actually going to do Command Z to undo that for now, because I want to show you something else here. We can just click and drag from the beginning of this project over roughly where we need it to go. So that's another way you can trim it. And notice, because I'm trimming this first clip and all these other clips are connected clips, it's actually moving the beginning of the project. So that's another thing that you can do and adjust. All right, so that's just some basic timeline navigation and editing and some little tips in there. If I click on the clip to select it, since this is our primary content, notice this highlighted time code in the time code viewer. This lets us know how long that clip is. Even though the entire project, counting all these titles and everything, is 3 minutes and 48 seconds, the actual clip is only 1 minute and 34 seconds. So it's still too long, but I can see how long it is there. And if I click and drag this over, I'm seeing in the little pop-up about how long it is. So if I let go right here, it's going to be 59 seconds and 20 frames. And again, if I select the clip, I can verify that up here, 59:25, which is less than 60 seconds. So it should be good for Instagram, right? It should be able to post there. And then I'm going to hit B again on my blade tool. And I want to cut all these. So I'm actually going to hold down the Shift key with the razor blade activated. And notice the tool changes. It gets a second blade, because this actually lets me, with one click, cut every single track that's there. I can do the same thing at the beginning and click to cut those and trim those out. So then I'll switch back to the arrow tool. I can select and delete those clips there. So I'm going to do Shift Z here to zoom in and fit the project. Now it's the correct time. And if I drag across this, notice my little custom animation back there is not at all following the actual progress of the video. It doesn't even fill up to the end because we keyframed it, and now we're no longer at the correct time. So we're going to fix that. So for that, I'm going to select my custom text here. Let's just drag it back out so it fits in the window here, right about there. And if I do that, we can see the first keyframe looks good. I'm going to do Shift Z again, Shift Z to fit this whole clip. But I actually want to fix this second keyframe. So this is where I'm going to use the video animation editor. And I'm going to hit the B key actually to cut this end stuff, because we know we don't want that. And we're going to bring up the video animation inside of the timeline here, which you can right click or control click and then say show video animation. This is also the shortcut Control V. So show video animation, and what this does is it shows us all of these tracks here above that clip. And it's kind of useless right now because we're just messing with our crop parameter, which is actually part of the part of our trim tool here. It's our transform. Why am I not seeing that one? Let's go. We crop the right side here. So I'm going to go trim right. And this looks correct, right? So we're trimming, which probably should be called crop, I guess, for that one. But we're trimming the right side. And if you look, it's kind of hard to see. Let's see if I can maybe zoom in. I don't have zoom turned on. But there's a little keyframe at the beginning here. I can see that one. I can drag this where I need it to go. And notice that is going to be where it starts to do the crop. If you watch up in the viewer here as I go across. So again, this can be very confusing, but I'm going to move that keyframe to the beginning of this clip. And then I know I have a keyframe off to the right side here, but I've cut it off, right? I've trimmed that clip so I don't see it. But if I go into the inspector, I can use this button to the right to go to the next keyframe, which is way down here, somewhere way off the project. I can go down there and we can actually remove that keyframe. Let me do Shift Z again. And probably the easier thing here is just to add another keyframe. So let's just add another keyframe. We're right at this spot. I'm going to go back one frame just like I did earlier because we want to add it in our project. Add the keyframe. There we can see it It's really, really small, but if you're following along, you can add the keyframe there. And then I'm going to adjust the right crop parameter back to 0 so that it goes all the way across. So a little confusing if we cropped everything, but these keyframes you can move in time where you want them to go, and that'll allow you to adjust the length of that crop. So that's the video animation editor. I can close that out. Again, looking through and just playing through this, scrubbing through it, I can see my video in the background there. Right at the end of the video is when I kind of run by the camera and then the dust settles. If you want it to, you can use the trim tool to roll this back and forth to adjust the position of it. But for time's sake, let's say this is what I like. The last thing I'm going to do here in Final Cut before I send this up and share this is generate and keep our first frame. So I want to actually adjust the first frame here. And you can do that either by editing and putting different elements and different things up, but we can also go to a specific spot in the video and we can create a freeze frame of what's there. I actually want to use every single layer, so I'm going to select every layer, otherwise it'll just do the one, and I'm going to group these into a compound clip. So again, you can either right click on it and say new compound clip, or you can use option G. And this can be a little bit confusing, but the reason I'm going to create a compound clip here, and again, name your clip so you can keep things organized. Time's sake, I'm just going to quickly go through it. But the reason I'm creating a compound clip is I can see my entire video here. It starts about here. I can trim the beginning of this. So I just have my 1-minute project, 59 seconds. But now that it's a compound clip, I can go to the part of the video that I want to use as the freeze frame, which in this case, the running by the camera is probably the most exciting thing, right? We see the shoe, the camera, people are kind of like, what's going on? So this is what I'm going to actually use as a freeze frame. And you can make this just by going up to Edit and say Add Freeze Frame. Again, we don't want the frame put right here in the middle, so I'm going to take this out and put it back over here. I can use Command plus to zoom into the timeline because we only need this to be the first frame of the video. So I can drag this all the way down to where that, notice right above on the timeline there, it says 0001. That means this is going to be 1 second or one frame long. And then I'll do Shift Z to zoom out. So now the beginning of the project, which on Instagram is going to show when you're scrolling through, it'll show this frame. And then when they play the video, it goes and plays it from this point, and they're able to watch it and scrub through it. So summarize, we added some video. We added text on the top and the bottom in the corner here, and we made our little progress bar going across the bottom. You can go through and add any other additional elements that you want, but one thing to keep in mind here is how Instagram is actually going to compress this video. Because this video is very simple. There's subtle movements in the clouds if you scrub really fast across it. But then when we get to this point, dirt changes, a lot of stuff is changing. But in reality, only about maybe a third at most of the pixels are actually changing and moving with dirt. So this is going to probably compress pretty well. If we were to zoom in on this and have a car chase or something else happening where there's a ton of movement, that's going to compress really poorly. And your video is not going to look good when you get over to Instagram. So just make sure that you consider the movement, the placement, and what's in your frame when you go to compress this and export it out, because Instagram does compress this way down. So faster movements mean lower quality in the long run. That's kind of the summary of this. So when you shoot these, when you consider what you're going to post, try to post shorter clips. One example of this that you can use is if you go over to either GoPro's Instagram page, which I'll bring up here. GoPro is a really good example because they're a camera company. They're trying to sell how great the quality is of their cameras. And doing it on Instagram is unfortunate because they don't have as much control on the videos and the quality that you're going to see. But if you watch any of their Instagram videos, you can see, notice the first frame was the bird here. That's that first frame. So this is an example of why you'd want to create a custom first frame so that you can actually see something that looks pretty cool and it invites people to click on it, right? If I see this bird looking in, that's like, well, what's going on here? I want to see that. So when I click on play, then it actually plays the video, which starts with the bird walking over. And if I pause this here, if you look really closely, you might not be able to see it on the live stream, but if you go on a GoPro's page and watch, look through it, we can see the compression on the edges of this bench here. Even on the bird, it's not a solid line where his fur is. It's kind of grainy because this is all compression that's mostly going to come from Instagram's compression, especially here. Look at how grainy all of this is because Instagram is a mobile platform. It's designed to be shared. It's designed to be watched on a phone. It's not designed to be watched on your big screen HD TV or your high quality computer monitor. It's designed to be on a little mobile screen. So it is very, very compressed. It also plays almost instantly because of how compressed it is. But notice how, obviously, the bird drops it. But notice right here at the end of this, the sky actually looks pretty good because there's only a few frames of the bird moving in that shot. So if you want to understand compression more, do some searches. There's a lot of things out there. But when it comes to the platform of Instagram, I find it best to just watch videos. A lot of times I have people send me examples of what they want to see. And again, let's go over to Dan Locke's Instagram here. So someone sent me this as an example. They said, I want to create a video that looks like this. And that's what we used to go through and create it. So if there's an example of you see something that's really good quality, but you're wondering why is not my video doesn't look like that, compare them side by side and see what's different in them, or send me the links and I'll show you exactly what to look at for that. So with that all said, we have our project. It's edited. It's ready to go to Instagram. So what are the ways to share it? What should you select? Well, you're going to go up to the top left and click on the share button there. And then I recommend sharing it as a master file. I would not recommend selecting anything else. Just share it as a master file. And if you get this warning, if you're using proxy media, that is lower resolution video, make sure to go up to the view menu here and change it to optimized or original media. This will give you the full quality media as opposed to exporting a proxy, which is a lower resolution or again lower quality video, which proxies are great for editing purposes, but when you want to master something at the end, you want to switch away from the proxies. So here we're going to go in and select master file. Notice because I switched it, we don't get any error. I can go in and name it. I recommend naming it to keep things organized, maybe add a version number. So maybe this is version 1.0. Just to keep track of things. And looking at the bottom here, I can see it sharing it at 1080 by 1080 at 30 frames per second, which is exactly what I want. If it was any lower, it may be something with your project settings or something else that you have. And then I can go over to the settings tab and see how it's exporting it, which right now it's sending both video and audio, which is perfect, but it's using the codec of H.264. So I actually want to change this and go up to source. That way it exports the full quality video. And take a note here in the lower right corner, it shows the estimated size. So it's at 980 megabytes. If I switch back to H.264, H.264 is 115 megabytes. It is a fraction of the size. It's like 10-15%. It's much, much smaller, which means it's much more compressed. So we want to send Instagram the best quality we can so that their compression works better. So I'm going to send the source media, which sends over the full quality. I don't have to worry about rolls or what to do when it's done. That's all I need to change. I can scrub through, make sure it's the full video, which I can see it is. So that looks good. And I'll hit next. I can name it, and I'm going to save it on the desktop. I just did Shift-Command-D to adjust this to the desktop, and then I can hit save. Cool. So that's how we can export it out and be able to switch over, which is really nice. So to get now what we're going to have essentially when this is done sharing is we're going to have a full quality version on the desktop, right? It's still on the computer. We need to get it over to our phone in order for it to remain in that quality. And this is one of the spots, just like when you hit share, a lot of people mess up there and create a lower quality. This is another place that a lot of people do incorrectly, which causes issues with quality. So here on the desktop, I'm going to hit the space bar for my Instagram video. And notice here it is. I can see the first frame. I can scrub through it and see that whole video. Notice full screen. It looks pretty good. It's not too bad. So to get it onto my iPhone, I'm going to control click or right click on that file. and I'm going to share it using AirDrop. So I can say share and then AirDrop. And when I do share for AirDrop, it's going to show me devices that are in the area that I can share to. So if it's my iPhone, I can go onto my iPhone, bring that up, and allow that to be recognized so it can be shared over to that device. If it's another device, you'll see it as well, and you can share to all those. I'm not actually going to go through this sharing spot, but you would just click on the phone when it comes up, and it can share it through there. If for some reason you're not seeing your device listed here, make sure that AirDrop is enabled on your phone, and make sure it's enabled to be able to see everyone. You might have it set to contacts only or even disabled, and that's why you wouldn't be able to see those other people. If you don't know where that is on your iPhone, just go into settings, tap on general, and then go to the AirDrop spot. And on AirDrop, you'll switch it over to everyone so you can see those people. Yeah, so that's about it. The other way you can send the file over is through a file sharing service, something like a Google Drive, or even sending it to iCloud to share it. Just make sure that whatever service you use is not compressing the video, right? If you go into an email client and you try to email the video over, it's going to be at a lower quality video, and it usually compresses it, which is great for email, but for Instagram, it's not that great. And then I mentioned this before, but if you have a non-Apple device, like an Android phone or another branded phone, or you can't get AirDrop to work any of those, just find a service like Google Drive or another one that allows you to sync files over to that phone. You might have like an Android sync app on your Mac that you can use to sync those files over. Just make sure when you do it, if you notice you play it back on your phone and it's really low quality before you share it to Instagram, then you know however it got from the computer to your phone, that's what caused the lower quality. So just verify that spot. And then I mentioned this as well earlier. If you're not going to your phone to post, if you're posting through a website like Later or another app that actually will make those posts for you, check with those companies and those apps and their support pages to verify that you're giving them the highest quality and the highest resolution that you share. And then with all of this, as a reminder, test it. Test. Try it as many times as you want. Send over the video. Make sure it looks good on Instagram. If you can, set up a test Instagram account, or maybe use your personal Instagram account to test the files and play them and see how they work and see what works well and what doesn't. If you have a post that you do and it works great, remember the steps that you did. Remember what filters you put on, even effects that you've added here in Final Cut. Something as simple as adding a black and white or like the 50s TV look to a clip can really make a difference in how it shows up and performs on Instagram. So don't just expect the steps that I've showed you here to all of a sudden make your videos magically look better. You're going to want to test these. Every video is different, so just keep working with it and see what works great using those accounts, using private accounts. And then also when you're testing, try it on different devices. So don't just open Instagram, look at the post on your private account and say, okay, that looks great, and then post it to your business account or whatever it is. Test it on other devices. See how it looks on an iPad or even on the Mac going through the website. You want to test it on these different devices in different scenarios, just like you would a regular video that you edit with Final Cut. You're going to want to test those in all those options. Just consider how people are going to be viewing and working with those content, that content. And then my last little tip and something to consider, because I recommend, for example, like looking at the first frame of the video and seeing how that frame looks. And because that's what shows up on this page, right? This is just the GoPro Instagram account. The first frame is what everyone's going to see when they're scrolling through all your posts, and it might be what attracts you to click on their post. But also consider the layout here of all these videos. I wouldn't just have every single video be its own piece of content and its own thing. I would recommend considering how this layout's going to look and using that to your advantage to create a theme. So if I go over to my Final Cut Pro Help Instagram page, you'll see what I've done. And very, very simple, but I've shaded that first frame to be a little bit darker. So every post that's a Final Cut post is a darker post because the backgrounds are going to be always different. I'm always showing some different area of Final Cut or something else. So I can see that the darker ones are Final Cut, and you as a viewer can go through and scroll through really quickly and see, okay, the red ones are motion posts. So if you're not using motion to edit graphics, you'll skip over this one and then go to the next Final Cut one. So that's what I recommend, is consider how all these posts look together. And that's a great way to work with that content and see what's on there. And then just review it, make changes, adjust things, and test things out there, because that's a great way to switch between everything. So that is the essentially what I had for talking about Instagram and using Final Cut Pro with Instagram to create posts and create some things. These are questions that I've received periodically. If you do have any other questions or things that I didn't cover here, definitely put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to reply to those. If you are watching this on a replay, you can still leave it in the comments below or send an email to finalcutprohelp@me.com, and I will do, like I said, my best to get back to you. So hopefully you learned something there. I think there was one other little topic I want to talk about, and that's taking a project that you've already created and sharing it over to Instagram. So for example, I just have some random shots here on the project. What if I wanted to share this to Instagram as a square video? To do that, you're going to have to convert this project to a square project. And it's pretty straightforward. You just select the project. I recommend duplicating it, which you're going to go up to Edit, and you want to say Duplicate as Snapshot. And I've talked about this plenty, but you want to do it as a snapshot. That way each project is completely separated. If you do just duplicate it and you have compound clips or other types of media, it's possible that you change it in the non-square version and it updates it in the square version. So usually to duplicate a snapshot, when you do that, it creates a new project in our browser here that's named the same thing as the other one, but with the word snapshot and the date and time there. So you can delete that and maybe say for Instagram. I'll just do for IG. Then I'm going to double click on that project to open it. Again, the name shows up in the middle, so that's how I know I have the correct project open. And then I'm going to go into my project settings to adjust this one, right? So I'm going to select the project, which loads the info inspector for that project. And at the top right, I can click Modify. Brings up my settings here, and I'm actually going to switch it to the custom format. Let's say we want to do square. We're going to do 1080 by 1080. We want to switch it. The frame rate actually is a good call. The frame rate you can't change. So you're stuck with whatever you used in the original project unless you rebuild it from scratch. But I can definitely change the resolution, and I can click on OK. And then notice here in the project, it did the spatial conform of fit and shrunk down those clips so that we can see it. And then because these are video clips, they look great. But if I go over here to this still image of the roses, that one, it's still doing the correct spatial conform, but it's filling the entire frame, right? So that can be a little frustrating, especially if you have a slideshow that's all still images. When you do that fit, it's going to be the whole square thing. So if that happens, what you'll want to do before you duplicate the project is back in the original version, just do Command A, select all of your clips, do Option G to create the compound clip, and then go and duplicate the project. So for example, I'm going to keep that one, but I'm going to select this one. We'll go up to Edit. We can do Duplicate a Snapshot or Shift Command D. It duplicates it as the snapshot. I'm going to rename it. Let's do 4IG, and then I'm just going to do CC for compound clip. I can double click on the compound clip, and if I scrub through this, if I scrub through it, it's all still one. And now I'm going to adjust these settings for it. So select the project, go up to the Modify button, and we're going to change our resolution to a custom video resolution of 1080 by 1080. And we're going to hit OK. And now, just like before, it's adjusted the videos. Those look great. And then if I go over to the picture, yeah, actually it still zoomed in on it because it's that still image, right? It's still going outside the bounds there. So that's annoying, but because this is a compound clip, I can actually select this compound clip. I can go into our crop parameter here. I can actually crop the top and the bottom. And if I just adjust it to 1 pixel, because this might be a little bit of a glitch. I think it should do it correctly. But if I do top and bottom as 1 pixel, it doesn't crop. It crops a really small amount of the video, and then it also crops the still image there. So that's how you can do that. And then you'd go through, apply all of your adjustments to it. So you either do it that way, or you have to manually go through and reposition all of your still images and all of your clips to exactly where you want them. But that's how you can convert a project. Just make sure to duplicate it as a snapshot. That way we can always go back to our standard 16:9 version or use the square version at any point. Okay, that was the last thing I wanted to talk about for Instagram. Let's now move on to the Q&A, which again, I've gotten a lot of questions today. Over the past month or so, both that have been sent to me directly, but also questions that have been posted in forums, things like the Final Cut Pro groups that are on Facebook and other places. I've seen some of these questions come through. So this is a collection of all of those and some of the best ones that I've seen as far as questions and some of the most unique. And then some of them are also very common questions. So hopefully if you are kind of like, I don't really know what I want to know, something in this Q&A will probably stand out to you. So the first question came through from Facebook, and the person says, I've got a whole bunch of footage shot on a gimbal, which is like a stabilizer, shot on a gimbal, and it's upside down. Do you know if it's possible to flip some clips 180 degrees in the browser window? Right, so you have your timeline at the bottom, and he's saying specifically in the browser, that's where we want to get those clips rotated. So let me open up the question 1 project. Here I have 2 example clips. Girls just working out, right? But they try to get some low angles, so they shot low, but they did it upside down. So that's where we need to adjust these clips. And what the person wants to do, though, is not just adjust them here in the timeline, because you could do that pretty easily. You could go up to transform and rotate the clip around to make it the correct orientation. But what this person wants to do is update it in the browser so that it's always that way, because you're never going to want an upside down clip, at least for this purpose. So I'm going to right click on the video from the timeline. I'm going to say reveal in browser. And what this is going to go through and do is just sort through the entire browser to find that clip. And I can see here in the browser as well, those clips are upside down. So you can't destructively change this footage in the browser. It's just not possible because Final Cut is a non-destructive editor. That's one of the nicest things about it. You don't have to worry about destroying your clips. However, in this case, we do want to change those. So we're going to right click on the clip here in the browser, and we're going to say reveal in Finder. We shortcut Shift Command R for that one. So this one opens up the browser, and I'm actually going to switch over to the gallery view that's new to macOS Mojave. I like this view for presenting videos. And here we can see that video is upside down, right? Head should be up at the top, not at the bottom there. So we're going to switch this. And one of the features added to Mojave is these quick actions, which we can actually rotate this clip. Just by hitting rotate left, I'm going to do it twice. And now we can see it's as expected. She's moving up and down the clip instead of down and up the clip instead of the reverse. And I can even do this in a batch, right? So I know there's multiple clips here that are upside down. You can actually select those clips. Let me undo this one to rotate it back. We can actually select multiple clips. I'm just holding down Shift to select those, and then do our rotate. And notice it's rotating both clips as I go through and do that. So that's pretty cool, right? You're adjusting it. You don't even need to open up QuickTime to do a flip or rotation. With Mojave, you can do it directly here in the Finder. And because we did that in the Finder, Final Cut is referencing that footage, so Final Cut's going to update and point to the correct clip as well. Sometimes these updates are a little bit slow, like right now it didn't live update, but let's try scrolling around and switching. We'll see if we can get this. I'm going to drag this down on. Yeah, it didn't live update here, right, because I made some changes. If that happens, just do Command Q, quit Final Cut. It might take a second to quit, but then you can hit on the app to reopen it. So that's something that you can do as far as working with the footage. You just have to understand that Final Cut looks at those files in the Finder, and you can't destructively change those files. Just like if you trim a clip, it's not going to delete or adjust those clips. You always have the original to go back to. So if you want to do something to the original, so in the browser it shows up, right-click on it, say Reveal in Finder. You can then make your change, whether it be rotating it or whatever the change may be, and then it'll update inside of Final Cut as well. You can already see here in the timeline it's updated both of those clips, but if I do Reveal in Browser or Shift F, I'm going to see that clip, and notice now in the browser here they're showing up correctly rotated. You might have noticed right there, this one on the right, the thumbnail is still updated. Final Cut thumbnails can be a little bit slower to update, but for me, that's not a big deal. That's fine. I wouldn't worry about it. It will update at some point when you make changes. But the actual content, because we're seeing it the correct way in the viewer on the right, looks great, and I think we're all set with that one. So that was the first question. And the next one I have is I got a direct message from Alex on Instagram, and he asked a pair of questions. The first one was, if I go crazy with my timeline and I want all of the clips in the timeline basically on one timeline, how can I achieve this? So he's got a whole bunch of layers, and he just wants to put them all down onto one. So let me open up my second timeline here. So let's say it's like this, right? He's gone crazy, meaning he's just stacked a bunch of clips, and we got a title in there and some other things. I've just set up a random assortment of stuff. And he's just saying, how can I get all of these clips just to be on one timeline? Which what he was referring to is the primary storyline. He kind of wants one track here. So there's two ways that you can do this or achieve this. The first is you can click on one of the clips, and then on your keyboard you can do Option, Command, and the down arrow. And what that'll do is it'll take that clip and it overrides it down onto the primary storyline. So I could do that with this one. Maybe I select these and we'll do down arrow as well. And notice it's dropped everything down onto the primary storyline here and overrid whatever was there. So it actually erased those clips. So that's one way to do that, but most of the time that's not actually what you want, because that might get rid of a clip or something that you had there. So we can do Command Z. I'm going to undo those last couple steps here to get to this view. So what I'd actually recommend is do Command A for all, select all, and then Option G to combine these into a compound clip. Again, name this clip, whatever you want to call this whole group of clips there, and say OK. And now what you have is you have one track. This timeline looks really clean, looks really good. If you want to, you can double click on it. It opens up the compound clip so you can see everything. We know we're in the compound clip because it shows the name of the compound clip here. And if you want to go back outside of that clip, just hit the left arrow to go back a step, and you have your whole grouping there. So that's usually what I recommend doing to clean up your timeline. Do select all, Command A, Option G. Command A, select all, Option G, combine them into a compound clip. And then his second question, he asked, if I marked a clip on the timeline with the range selection tool, how can I cut away what's around it and keep the selection? So that's a great question. So the range selection tool, if you hit your tools menu, is this one right here in the middle. You can just hit the R key also to activate that tool. And what this allows you to do is click and drag across a range or an area. Notice it's not dragging the clip, you're just making a selection. And now we have that selection here. In our little time code here, I've selected 18 seconds and 28 frames. So I've selected a little portion of that clip. And what he wants to do is cut out this area on the front and the back. He only wants to keep what's in this selection. Because if I just hit the delete key, it actually deletes the selection, and it kept what was around it. I'm going to do Command Z to undo that. So what he actually wants to do is keep what's there. So you can go up to the trim menu if you want and say trim selected, trim selection, that's there. But you can just use the shortcut Option and then our slash there. So if I do Option slash, notice it deleted what was on the front and the back, and now we just have the 18 seconds and 28 frames that was selected. So that's how you can make that selection. Hopefully that answers your question. And any of these, if you're still confused, leave a comment or reach out to me. So moving on to our fourth question here. This one came from a YouTube comment. If using B-roll footage for a cutaway, what are the benefits of the connect edit rather than just adding the footage in the desired position on the primary timeline? which what the person meant is primary storyline. And in parentheses, this person says, please forgive my ignorance. I'm a complete noob. Nothing wrong with being a complete noob. You can ask people that have been editing for a long time with Final Cut Pro 10. Some of them won't even know this as well. So there's nothing wrong with your questions. Like I said earlier, you think you might be asking a question that's, a noob question or a really, really easy question, but some of these are really important. So I just showed in the other project, we did the Option Command down arrow to move things down onto the primary storyline, which kind of answers this question, because right now on this project we have an interview down here, which is just blurred out. We don't really need to know what's down there. But then here's our B-roll, right? It's our secondary footage where I'm seeing this person on the beach. So the person talking is probably saying, I felt like I was just sitting on the beach. It was the most relaxing thing ever. I could just listen to the waves and see the wind going through my hair. And we don't need to hear her talking about that. We'd rather see it, right? So we can understand what she's talking about. So you could select this and say this B-roll is up in your timeline. So I'm going to right click and actually say reveal in browser. Let's say it's not down here, because what the person is asking is essentially, why would I go down and connect it, which would keep it up here, versus putting it on the primary storyline? Right, so I can go here, and I have an option here that is insert the selection in the primary storyline. So I can click on that, or I can actually want to do override in this case, just to override it. And notice it puts it on the primary storyline, right? And so we get exactly the same thing we saw before. We're seeing the interview. She's still talking. That's the audio down here. But now we're seeing herself or whoever the subject is sitting on the beach there, right? So visually, that's the same thing as going down and connecting the clip. If we play it back, it's the same. So what are the benefits? The benefits are customizations. Later on, if you don't need this B-roll, or maybe you want to switch it out for a different shot, you might need to change the time of it and go back to the interview. So by having it on as a connected clip, it just makes it a little bit easier to customize and make changes to it, in my opinion. Now, if your B-roll is going in a spot where there's no interview, maybe this is a little montage that we're connecting to later on, say with this clip, I can just add that to the end. There's no reason to connect it at that point. There's not really any benefit unless you plan to have an interview later, but you could always go on later, do Option Command up arrow to lift that clip from the primary storyline later on. So in that case, this is still, a lot of people just still consider this B-roll because it's not an interview, it's not your primary footage. But if there's no interview happening, if there's nothing else happening at that time, then really it is your primary footage. It is your A-roll because there's not something else going on. So essentially the reason to connect it is more customizations later on. So the next question we have is from Stuart, who on Twitter asked how to delete saved colors in Final Cut Pro 10. So this is kind of a fun one. So here I have this title right here, right? Just Jared, and then the app Final Cut Pro Help handle. And I've made it this goofy cyan color. And if I select the title and go into my little inspector up here, I can go down to the face spot, which we looked at earlier. And here's our color, right? So I could hit the little drop down arrow and select the color and change it this way. But if I actually hit the well where the color is, that brings up my color window, which we saw earlier. So what Stuart wants to do is he wants to delete some of these saved colors at the bottom. And if you don't know, if you select the color, maybe we go into customizations at the beginning here, maybe we make some adjustments to the color, or maybe we even hit the eyedropper and go over and select like some of the sun background. Maybe we select a very specific color. If I want to save that for use in another app or somewhere else, I can just click and drag this into any of these little wells to save that as a custom color. This is a really good thing to do if you have a logo or if you have a color scheme that you're reusing in Final Cut. Maybe you're using Pages to create physical documents and you always want to have the same color being used. That's what these little saved colors at the bottom let you do, because this is a system thing. This is Mac OS. This doesn't have anything to do with Final Cut because you can use this in any app, not just Final Cut. But as you start adding these colors, you can add as many as you want. You can see if I drag this up, there's as many wells. I don't know how far down it goes, but I know there's just a ton of wells, basically as many saved colors as you could want. But if you do want to delete a color, because sometimes you add one you don't need anymore, in most apps, you can just click on the color and it'll actually highlight or outline that color. However, here in Final Cut, for some reason, it doesn't do that. If you are in an app that does that, you can click on it and hit the delete key, and that will remove that color. But if you're in Final Cut, what you have to do is just click and drag that color down to your trash. And when you drag it down to the trash and let go, it deletes it. Notice that yellow saved colors there. We want to get rid of this green. I'm just going to drag it down to the trash, and that gets rid of it. I have at times recommended just go in, maybe select white, which is basically no color, or you could choose black, white or black, just to add it in. But that's actually adding in a shade. So if you want to delete them, just click and drag them down into the trash, and then you can remove that color, Stuart, and that should take care of that question there, that problem that you had. All right, moving right along here. We're going over to question 6, and this one was a little tricky at first, but once you understand what's happening, it's a little bit easier to find out. So this next question is related to a template that was downloaded from a third-party website. And the site for this, if you're used to plugins, you probably have used this and done this at one point, and you might have heard of this company. But the plugin is actually called Shatter, and it's from a company called Motion VFX. And great company. They make a lot of really great templates and great things. But when you're working with a template that's third party, you can run into some interesting issues. And that's actually what happened here with this template. So what this template is, if I scroll down, we can see some of the effects. And let's see if we can scrub through the preview here. What this template, I'm going to mute it because we don't need that audio. But what this template does is it shows these little shattered pieces of glass. And it shatters them, animates them, and then you can have text moving across. And, just makes sense, right? Just shattered glass, kind of a cool little effect and filter there. And I'm a big fan of it. I thought it was pretty cool. The person reached out to me and was like, hey, this is what I'm using. And I'm like, that's a cool feature. Here's the problem, though. Like, that's what it's supposed to look like, right? But what it actually looked like was this. It had just these letters with the background on there of the video it was cracking, and it didn't actually look the way it was supposed to. Because what it should look like is this. When you put in the picture, it should show that picture in the little shards of glass. That's really what that template is supposed to do. But that's not what it did. So this one was kind of interesting. I was like, okay, what's going on with this one? So when you get a template, which I can right-click or just select the template here, and I can go up to the, in this case, it's a generator, so I can go up to the Generators tab, and I can see all the various drop zones, right? So I'm like, okay, maybe we did something wrong. We put a wrong drop zone in it. But it just has the well to put it in there, and there's also a background. I didn't add any background. It's just a gray background there. You could disable that if you didn't want that. But there's no controls. If you dig through all this, there's no controls to change it. You can make some adjustments and it's the video, and it changes where it is in the letters. And this is where it's kind of weird, because now I'm like, okay, what's going on with it? So this is a template that was created or designed with Motion. So if I go into my titles and generators sidebar, I can actually go in and see that, that shatter template. And this is one that the person that was having an issue reached out to me because the other support guys over at Motion VFX weren't fast enough in responding, and I was available, so why not? So here's the template, and I can see here if I go up here on the template itself, it still has those letters, HICN, and so it doesn't really tell me anything. I just know that in the template itself, it's broken. And if you have Motion, on these templates, you can actually right-click on them and say Open in Motion. If you don't have Motion, it's a little unfortunate because it's harder to inspect this and actually figure out what's going wrong. But because I have Motion, this is what I did. I said, hey, send me one of those templates, and I'll open it up. I'll try to find out what's happening. So I opened it in Motion, and this is what came up. And most of the time, I don't care about fonts in that much detail. A lot of times there's a missing font, and I'm like, okay, maybe he did something on his system, whatever, and it's not there. But in this case, the font missing is actually what was causing the problem, because it's really clever. What they've done here to build this template is they've actually used a font to simulate or emulate the shards of glass. So that was what the problem was. If I look through all the layers to see where those pieces of glass were listed, I can go down here. There's a shatter group, and there's the 4 different shatters, and they're all set to a letter. I can go to the inspector. These are just text pieces, right? So I was like, okay, that's kind of weird. But then I found out that normally when you get this template, it includes a font. And for whatever reason, when the person installed it, that font didn't come over. So I went in, I found the font. Here it is on the desktop. I'm just going to double click on the font. Here's my shatter font. I'm going to install that font. And if I look at the font, it looks really weird because it's not actually a font. Well, it is a font, but it's not text that you would write. It's just each letter is represented by a design that is actually the piece of glass. That's actually the shard of glass. So if I switch back over, I'm going to quit motion here because we don't need that. But if I switch back over to Final Cut and I look at my template here, it's still messed up there because it's missing that font. So I'm going to control click and say open in motion. Sometimes you'll have to go and reinstall these, but if I reopen this in motion, ideally it's going to show that the font is no longer missing. So let's see when this loads up, we'll see what we get. So now notice the shards of glass are showing instead of the letters, right? So if I select one of these shatters, I go in the inspector, it just shows the letter N, because in the inspector, it always shows whatever the text is, just kind of the default text here. But in the picture, I'm actually seeing the line of text. If I change this from an N to an M, looking over on the right here, this is where it's changing. It's changing the shard that it's using because they actually created a font that generates each of those shapes, and that's what ends up creating your shard of glass. So I thought this was really cool. I think it was a very clever way of designing that template and building it. And then just like before, if it doesn't update right away in Final Cut, just quit and relaunch Final Cut. Most things do update pretty quickly, but usually when I'm doing the live stream here, it's just accessing too many things because I'm recording it and doing a couple other things. So if it doesn't update right away, quit, relaunch. It should update it and show it to us now. If not, we'd uninstall and then reinstall that app. But that is the kind of what's going on. And that question came from Jake, who reached out via Instagram and was just struggling with it. And it makes sense, right? Who would expect that shards of glass in a template is not working because a font's not installed on your computer? You know, it's just a very bizarre problem to have. So it's not updating, which is fine. We could just, oh no, it did update. It's not updating the thumbnails, which is fine. It will do those eventually. But yeah, now you can see in our viewer here, it has the shards of glass in there the way that it's supposed to look, and it's showing my delicious dessert back there instead of something else. So that was a really cool question to go through, just for me as a technical person breaking it apart. And then the next question comes from Marcus, also on Instagram. And what Marcus did is he added the black hole transition, which is a transition included inside of Final Cut. But he added the black hole transition and the clip in his project, but he received unexpected results. It didn't do what it was supposed to do. And let me show you what happened here. So this is the transition, the black hole transition that he added. And what he was trying to do, essentially, he had some B-roll clip behind it, which in this case is these robots moving, I believe, desserts around. And then we have this coffee cup on top. And what should happen is this. Let me play this clip for you. What should happen is the black hole transition happens. It sucks that coffee cup into the black hole, and now it's gone, right? That's what should happen. But what he was saying is this. He would play it, and it would suck it literally into black. It would just change the background to black. And then when the transition was done, it would jump back over to the clip. So these are actually compound clips. I'm going to open you up and show what happened here. So how he had it set up is like this. The clip was actually on the primary storyline, the coffee cup, and the clip he was transitioning to is this dessert arm in the background, which is a connected clip. It's connected below the other one. You could always connect it above, but in this case, he's below it. That way, when the transition happens, it goes down into the other clip instead of the other clip covering it up. So, so that's what was happening. And what's the problem here is this transition is transitioning into black. And when it transitions, you're seeing what's behind it. So the clip that's laying on top, which in this case is the coffee cup, sucks into a black hole in the middle of the clip it's transitioning to, which if you look here on this primary storyline, it always has to transition to something when it's on the primary storyline, and that's going into black. And then when the transition is done, there's no more video, so then it goes down and shows us our other clip. So how do you actually correct that? Well, let's go into this other clip here. What I did is just lifted the clip off of the primary storyline and put the other one on the primary storyline. Because when you have a connected clip, it's not required to transition into anything. So in this case, when the transition happens, because it's connected, there's no black after it, it's just transitioning into nothing. And that's why we don't see any clip behind it there. So again, when you add a transition, if you get unexpected results like that, make sure that you view what you're transitioning into. If you're on the primary storyline, you either have to have a clip that you're transitioning into, or it is going to transition into black. And if that happens, select your clip. Let me actually go back over to the other clip here, and I'll show you me fixing it. So I would actually just select this clip, Option Command up arrow to lift it off of the primary storyline. And then I can do the same thing with our clip down here to actually put it onto the primary storyline, which is Option Command down arrow, even though we're already down there. And in doing that, I didn't have the transition selected, so let me go over and get that black hole transition. So here is black hole, and I'll drag that right onto our top clip here. And boom, there we go. If I play it, it looks as we expected. So Marcus, hopefully that answers that question. I know on Instagram you said it was all good, so hopefully other people get some value from that one. So now moving on to question 8. So we're about halfway through our questions here. And again, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate, reach out here to help. So we're going to go into this next project because the question was how to locate a bad clip or a bad frame. And unfortunately, I don't actually have a bad clip, but I'll show you the error message that this person was receiving, because this is something that is very annoying if you see something like this. So this is an example. This is a much older version of Final Cut with the error message, but you'll see something similar to this. And usually this happens when you're sharing a project. You go to share your project, it works, it's doing stuff, but then at some point it brings up an error where it says either the share operation failed or it just says something interrupted it, there was something bad. Sometimes you even get an actual frame number where it says we couldn't complete it because an error occurred while creating frame number 377. And if you get a frame number, that's awesome. That really helps out. But maybe you don't get a frame number. But when this happens, how do you actually find that frame number, right? How do you see where it is? Well, the first thing, if you get an actual number, you can go up to the Final Cut Pro menu, which will go into Preferences. And you can, under the General tab of Preferences, change the time display to frames. And when you do that, you'll notice the timeline and our little time indicator here shows us the actual frame number. So in that case, the error I think said 377. So I can actually just scrub right to 377 and see what is happening there, which it is this clip. A few more frames down, 377 right here. I'm going to do Command plus just to zoom in on the timeline here. So that's this clip. If I got the error message and it said 377, I would know that this clip that I'm looking at on the timeline, that's the bad clip. So if that happens, you might just have to trim this clip to trim the bad frame out and get rid of that. Or you might have to delete that entire clip to remove it. So those clips can get corrupted for a number of reasons. The times I've dealt with it, a lot of times it's with my GoPro or with another action camera. I'll be recording something and either it'll be a really hard hit, maybe the camera gets dropped, and the impact that it took caused it to stop recording. Maybe the card fell out or something. It caused it to stop recording while it was recording. And that can cause a corrupted frame or a corrupted data. And then you won't notice it because you might still be able to play back the video. But then you go to export or share that project, and that's when you get the error message. So if that happens, that's one way to find that frame if you know where it is from an error message. If you can't find it that way, this is where I recommend using the range selection tool. Again, this is your tool menu, range selection, or hit the R key. It selects your range selection tool. And what we're going to do is what's called a split half search. So this project goes all the way down here. I'm in frames. Let me go to preferences, command, comma. I'm going to change this back to my standard frame or standard time code. So this project is about 1 minute and 45 seconds. So I'm going to do a split half search by going about halfway through the project and click and drag across this to select that portion of the project. And you can always adjust this to whatever spot you'd want to do. So by selecting that, notice the gold, I have 47 seconds selected. I can now go up to the share menu and I can export it however you are exporting the project, but it'll only share that portion. So if I do master file, for example, notice down here at the bottom, next to our frame size and the audio, it shows us this little range option, and it's only sending out the 54 seconds that's selected instead of the entire minute and 40 whatever second project. And if you can export that first section, then you know most likely the bad part is a little bit further on. So you can just then extend this a little bit further, try exporting it. Again, split half search. You're just going about halfway and see if you get the error. If you do get the error, then you know the problem is most likely in this area. So again, we'd select just maybe half of that and export it until we narrow down exactly where that clip is. Same thing. If you did the first export, like we were about here, if we did the first export and it failed, I would then take my range and do about half of this, try sharing it and exporting it to see where the problem is. Obviously, that's very tedious and very annoying to do it that way, but it's much faster than going through clip by clip to find something. You know, with one export, you can cut out half your project. And if your project is maybe it's a full-length documentary that's an hour and a half, 2 hours long, with one export, you've eliminated an entire hour of footage that is good by doing these exports or narrowing down to where the bad spot is. So that's usually what I recommend doing with navigating and finding a clip. The other way is just, your knowledge. For me, as someone coming in to troubleshoot your project, I don't know anything about it, and that's how what I use to find the error. But if you've been editing and you know that every single time you play back a certain clip, there's a weird glitch or Final Cut closes unexpectedly or just something weird happens, maybe there's a little lag or drop frames. If you see that always happening on one specific clip and you go to export and you get an error like that, well, then you can probably know and figure out that it is that specific clip that's having the issue, which in that case, just hit R, get your range selection tool. Let's say it's this last clip here. I can click and drag around it to just export that one little spot. It's kind of the reverse. You're using very specific knowledge you have of your project to find it. So that question, again, came online. Hopefully that answered that one. The next one came from, I think it's pronounced CBF, and that person asked, basically left a question on one of the videos, specifically the blade tool. There's a video I did about the blade tool, and it was asking, there must be a way to use the blade tool with more precision than the default. So like making rapid cuts for hats and snares in music videos, for example. So what this person is saying is that they're using the blade tool, right? I'm going to hit B to switch to the blade. They're using the razor blade tool to make cuts on a project. So like I have this audio clip down here at the bottom, and they're going through and they're making cuts and they're cutting, and essentially they're probably switching between video angles each time one of these beats happens with the drum kit, whether it's the snare or another part, maybe the hats is hitting. And so every time in the beat it goes, this person wants to make a cut. So they're saying there must be a more precise way, like with more precision, to use that blade tool. And here's the thing, the razor blade comes from the old film editing. When you actually have physical strips of film sitting in front of you, you would have to use a razor blade to actually cut them, and then you'd be able to put them together. Obviously now everything's digital, so we have that razor blade still because the analogy still works really well. Well, just like a razor blade, when you cut it, it's always at the fine point of what a razor blade is, which basically is as specific, as precise as you can get. So is there a way to make the razor blade tool more precise? Well, the answer is no, because it always is as precise as it can get. It's always cutting on one frame. However, when you are working with content and you are going through, say like the fireworks here, I can see the audio lines are spiking up and down. You could try to cut each of those. I'm going to try right on where each of the audio spikes happen. But even right here, I can't do it because snapping is turned on. So I'm going to hit the N key for snapping to turn that off. And now maybe I can get right here. And there's 2 middle pops out here, so I'll try and cut there. And I'm pretty surprised I was able to do just like that. But to be more precise, I'm actually going to zoom into that section of the timeline. And you could use Command+ on the keyboard, or we can go up to our zoom tool and just click and drag around that spot to zoom right into it. And I'm going to go in closer just on these 4 edits right here. Now notice if I zoom way in close on this, I tried to cut it right on where this firework, where the actual boom happened. And I got pretty close with these, but I'm not directly on where that actual sound is, where the pop happens. And if you're working with a drum kit, you might want to be right on the beat. So looking at this, if I use my arrows, I'm going to go left and right. Notice if I go left and right, I'm going to do right a couple times here. Right, 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 right. Notice how there's a kind of a light gray area from here to here in this area. And that represents one frame. So if you remember, if I'm cutting on something, it's always going to cut at one frame. So if I go over here to this firework, the boom actually happens not on a frame. It happens a little further in. And our time code, I think this project was 30 frames per second. Well, you can be more precise than a frame, but that's just when the picture happened. So we can't be any more precise really than I did here. I think every single one of those, I was able to actually to cut right on where the frame is for that firework. So video-wise, I can't get any more precise. But with the audio, we can cut at a subframe level. So especially with audio, when you have those snares and the different drum beats going off, you can go into preferences, and our time display, we can actually view subframes. So we can go to even closer than frames. And subframes are the little tiny numbers here. And that's where we have our audio subframes. So you can be more specific if you cut audio. And we can actually right-click on this video, and I could detach the audio just to bring it down here. And if I hit the B key for the razor blade and click right here where that one goes off, it'll let me cut at that moment. And I can even go in with the trim tool if I wanted to and just adjust where that audio is so that it does go right where the actual cut's going to happen. So to answer your question, you cannot be more specific than one frame, but you can use these zoom tools to go in really close to make the edits. And then if you want to, you can go at a subframe level to edit the audio and make subtle adjustments there. So I know we discussed that one a little bit, and that seemed to answer your question. It's just an understanding of how the blade tool works. Cool. So then the next one is not a question. I've been receiving questions about it, but it's not a question. It's more of a review of something that's happening soon, within the next couple months, I believe, and that is this warning that you may have gotten about legacy media inside of Final Cut Pro 10. And I just want to let you know that it's not a big deal. It's not something you really have to jump and kind of be super worried about just yet. And the reason is in the first, like it says in the article here, in the first half of 2019, which is what we're in right now, so hopefully anytime now, an updated version of Final Cut Pro will include a feature to help you identify and convert legacy media. So if you're receiving a message that says, hey, some of your media is not compatible with, or going to be compatible with future versions of macOS or Final Cut, don't worry about it. You don't have to jump to fix it just now, because Apple, I think, realized how much or how many people are using legacy media. And so they're going to create a tool and build it into Final Cut to make it easy for you to identify those and convert any of these legacy media formats, which are all listed on this article. They're going to help you find what those are and convert them, because these are just all old formats that some other editing applications are using. Most are not, so there's no reason for the Mac to continue supporting them when only a small number of people are using them in the eyes of Apple. So if you've seen that, don't worry about anything. Let's wait till the next update of Final Cut comes out in the future that includes this feature to convert them, and chances are that'll make everything much, much nicer. Awesome. So that was the 10th question of this stream, and I have 5 more questions that I'm going to answer. If you do have any other remaining questions, don't hesitate, put them in the chat. I'd be happy to answer those and to end this stream. But our next one is around Instagram stories, and these are some questions that I saw through Instagram stories and other things that came up when I posted an Instagram story on Final Cut Pro Help Instagram page and just asked for questions, what questions you have. So these are the questions that came through from there, and kind of all over the place, but there are questions that people have. And the first one is, how do I decrease and manage the size of a project? And this person says, I'm editing on a 128 gigabyte Mac. So that's a great question, because it's very easy to have a library that's extremely large. If I select my library here, I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to say Reveal in Finder. And yeah, here it is. And on the right side, this is my stock library that I just use for messing around on these streams. But we can see it's 57 gigabytes in size, which is actually not too bad. Some of my libraries are hundreds and even terabytes in size because of how much media is contained inside of them. And a lot of times if you create that media, you import it into Final Cut, and then you create proxies and you're rendering. Maybe you're using optical flow, slow motion, all these different things that create more files and can cause your libraries to become massive in size. So this person is saying, how do I decrease and manage the size of a project? Well, it's actually, you could do it inside of an event, but you're actually managing the storage for the library. So with the library selected, you can go up to File, and there's an option in here that says Delete Generated Library Files. So this is one way to manage storage, because you can delete render files, for example. You could say, I want to delete all the unused render files, or I want to delete everything, and then you'll just re-render. And you can also delete optimized and proxy media. And as long as you have your original media, which if you have a clip selected and you go into the info inspector, you'll see if that original clip is available. And actually that's an audio file. Let me do a video file because we can see the proxy file in the original. But as long as you have the original file available, you can then return and regenerate those files, whether they be proxy, optimized media, or any of the render files. It can always just re-render them. So I'm going to right click on a video clip here, reveal in browser, and I'll select this clip. And then over on the right here on the info, I go down to the bottom and I can see available media representations. So there is an original clip, which is the full quality clip as it came off the camera and it was imported into Final Cut. I haven't created an optimized version, that's why it's red. But I also have a proxy version, which is green. So if I wanted to, I could delete the proxy file, which would free up a little bit of space, because I have the original media. If you've deleted the original and optimized, and all you have is a proxy, or all you have is an optimized, if you delete those, you're losing your stuff. You're going to have to re-import. So that's just kind of a warning. If you go up here and you do the manage or delete the library files, the generated library files, if you do that, just make sure you understand with the optimized and proxy media where your original content is. So that's one way to free up some space. That was the first question, kind of how do you decrease the size of a project, or in this case, a library, because that's where all of your footage is. That's how you do it. Projects themselves don't really take up any space. They're pretty small in the grand scheme of things. And then the other part of it is just managing the size of the project. So one thing that you can do is a proxy workflow. And I recommend searching videos on this specifically. I have a couple on my website or on the YouTube page here. But essentially what a proxy website or proxy workflow is you could actually edit with just the proxy media. And you could store all of your original content, maybe on an external drive or a different computer. And you could just edit with the proxy media. So it is going to generate more things, but that'll allow you to edit, and not only helps with media management, because then maybe you only need to store a library that's 10 gigabytes instead of 50 gigabytes, because you could store all the original media on an external drive. But that also helps then with performance. Using proxies is one of the best things. If I go up to the view menu here, I'm in optimized and original because I switched it back. But if I switch into proxy, when I'm in the proxy workflow, everything works a lot better. Let me switch back to original or on here. If I scrub across, I don't know how well you'll be able to see that over the video. It's updating, but even there you can see there's a little lag here and there because it's loading pretty large files. Same thing if I go up into the videos here, there's a little bit of lag going down. You can see like a little bit of lag here. It's not loading. Okay, now it's loading. But if I switch this to proxies is using much, much smaller footage. So I'm able to do this. It's going to keep loading. I can do the same thing up here. It's loading the file. It's not freezing like it was with the original. Of course, if you don't have the proxy file, you'll see this big nasty error message saying it's missing the proxy. Not a huge deal. If I select that clip, I can see in the inspector, I only have the original. I haven't created a proxy, and that's why we're missing it. So I could just say generate proxy because the original is there. Cool. So that's how you can decrease and manage the size of your project. The next thing is, how do you make rendering faster? Well, I kind of just answered that. Really, with a proxy workflow is one of the easiest ways to make rendering faster. It still doesn't solve your problem with exporting the final project or sharing that out. But in terms of rendering, which is what you see on the timeline here, this little dotted bar is an unrendered thing. I can do, Shift Control R to start rendering. To make rendering faster, you can work with proxy media, or you can increase the horsepower of your computer. So here's what I mean by that. If you go up to the Apple menu, you can choose About This Mac to get information about your computer, and you'll see a couple things there. You'll see memory, your hard drive size, your processor speed, all kinds of different things. So these are just a couple tips. And if you already have a computer, it's hard to make changes to it. But I'm going to go into the Mac section here. I'm going to look at a MacBook Pro, which is probably the most common machine used with editing on Final Cut. I'm going to hit the buy button to go in and buy this computer. And I'm going to go with 15-inch model because there's more options here. And we'll just select one of these models. So here's what's the important specs of your computer. The first is when you look at your memory, which I have 16 gigabytes of 2400 megahertz DDR4 memory. So all of these numbers are important when we're talking about editing with video, because the amount of memory you have is important, but it's also the speed of the memory. So if you're looking at an older computer, this is the latest and greatest, but if you're looking at an older computer and you're trying to debate between two different ones that you see, if you have one that's 2400 megahertz for DDR4 memory, and then maybe another one has, let's say, 1000 megahertz of DDR3 or lower memory, that's going to make a huge difference. Even though they might both have 16 gigabytes of memory, for speed and performance, having faster memory makes a difference. Just like with your storage, if you have an SSD storage versus a standard spinning hard drive, SSD tends to be much faster. So how can you speed things up? Well, you can put all your footage on an SSD. You can get faster memory. On some computers, you can make changes to it. A lot of them you can't. A lot of times this is built in and that you can't make any changes to it. And then the next part of it is the processor, the speed of the computer, and that's up here. Final Cut does use the processor for many different tasks, and having a faster processor or more cores can help. And that'll just allow you to calculate things faster. And I'm not going to go too much more technical with that, but it's nice to have a faster processor. However, Final Cut relies heavily on the graphics card, the GPU. Out of any number here, they're all important. They all play some role in it. But I just say in Final Cut, when you have a computer that has like 4 gigabytes of graphics memory on your GPU, when you have more graphics memory, that really helps out in the speed of the performance of the computer. And a lot of the newer Macs, you can even get an eGPU, which is an external GPU that you can actually connect to the Mac. So if we go in here, I'm just going to do a search for eGPU on Apple's website. There's many. These are the Blackmagic ones, but there's many out there. And let's choose the really expensive one here, $1,200. So this is an eGPU, which essentially looks like this. It's this box that you just connect to your MacBook Pro or even your Mac Mini, and it gives it a huge boost in graphics memory. If we look back at the MacBook Pro, it had 4 gigabytes of graphics memory. If I look at this eGPU has 8 gigabytes of graphics memory and a whole bunch of connectors and things. So you can get a computer, even like a MacBook Air, and connect an eGPU to it, and that's going to be, in some cases, faster than even an iMac or a high-end MacBook Pro because it's adding 8 gigabytes of external memory to that. Now, you can definitely go in here, and there's options to get faster graphics cards, and there's other things in here, but that's kind of an overview of some of the stats that you have there. So how can you make rendering faster? Well, it starts with this hardware. Now, the other part of it, we saw over here, this was a eGPU by Blackmagic. Well, there's actually some tools you can get as well. So you can get diagnostic tools for your computer, like AJA makes a system test app, and Blackmagic makes a disk speed test. So you can get apps like that to run speed tests and actually test your hardware. And that usually will show you slowdowns in areas of your computer and your workflow that you can speed up. So that's one thing I recommend doing. Use those tools and get apps like that. But there's another one built into your computer already called Activity Monitor. And if you've never used Activity Monitor, this is a pretty cool app because it shows you everything that's running on your computer at any given time. You can even click this little you can even go up to the menu bar here, go under View, and you can view all processes hierarchically, meaning when they were started up. And I can close out some of these apps just to group all the different processes. Like, for example, related to Final Cut, we have a decoder running, we have an encoder running, there's some filters, FX Factory is running, but none of them are using any CPU time right now because the computer is very efficient. But I can see right now I'm live streaming this using the OBS app, and that's using a lot of CPU performance. And if I look down here at the graph, I can see the CPU load. And if my computer is running slow, and I went in here and I looked at it and it looked like this, I would know it's running slow because of OBS. It's that simple. Like, that's what's causing the slowdown here. I can even go up here to the memory tab and see how much RAM each of these apps are using. And if I look down here at memory pressure, my pressure, and you can hover over it, it gives you a little description of it, but the pressure is very low. It's not up at the top. It's not red or yellow. I even have no swap used, meaning I don't have any memory that had to get copied out of my 16 gigabytes to make room for other memory. So using this activity monitor, it's not the greatest graph. I think Blackmagic disk speed test, for example, has some pretty nice visuals. But if you know how to read the activity monitor, you can get an idea of what's taking up the most performance and the most resources from your computer. However, if I came to your computer and I looked at this and you said right now, it seems like my computer's running slow and I don't know why. Well, I would look at CPU. I would see that it's about half used, so that's not too bad. And I look at memory, and the memory pressure is not bad at all. So usually that would tell me your processor is probably fine, your memory is fine, then it might be a hard drive issue. You might be accessing video off of a USB hard drive, or that's where your project's stored, and that could be the slowdown. So again, for rendering purposes, make sure that all your footage is on a really fast hard drive, like an SSD. Make sure your memory is fast for processing, but rendering also uses a lot of the GPU speed. So make sure you have a great GPU. If it's a newer Mac, it's running slow, you might be able to get an eGPU depending on your budget, and that can help speed things up. But in all of it, just use tools out there like the AJA System Test or Blackmagic Disk Speed Test. Both of those, I believe, are free utilities. And then you can also use Activity Monitor to diagnose what's happening. Someone I was working with very recently was saying things were slow, but they just bought a new computer, and everything speed-wise looked fine to me when I used the machine. But what turned out was happening is they had Google Chrome running with a whole bunch of tabs of websites, and all of those were using up the resources of the computer, so Final Cut couldn't run well. So when I came over, it looked fine because they weren't running Chrome or any other apps. But when I left, they said, oh, it's gotten slow again. Well, it turned out that that was it. And using Activity Monitor, we were able to find that. All right, next question is around color grading, and this is one that's popped up a whole bunch. They're saying, which LUT should I use? Well, LUTs, L-U-T, are lookup tables, which is basically just a set of data that enables the transformation of a video clip in a certain way. It's kind of like applying a filter, but it's applying the pixel values, it's changing the actual pixel values to display a certain way. And this is used in it's probably used in more, but there's two really common ways that Final Cut looks at this and uses LUTs. The first are camera LUTs, and these are also known as camera log conversion. If you ever heard the word log, log footage usually has a LUT that goes along with it to convert it. Because log footage can look very flat. It might not look that inviting or nice. And the way this works is on your library, if you can go into Modify on the library itself, usually this is going to happen when you're using the wide gamma HDR variation. So again, I selected the library on the library sidebar. I hit Modify in the inspector, and I'm changing it from standard to wide gamut HDR. And this is what gives you access to the LUTs for the most part. This is what's going to do it. And when you have a clip selected, most of the time it's going to be a Rec 709 clip. This is the color space that was used for that clip. And those ones, there's not really a reason or a need to apply a LUT. I don't know if I have any log footage. I should have gotten a clip here that we can see. We'll see if any of these let me. They probably won't because these are all set for not on log recording there. And I don't think I'll see it. Yeah, we can see it. So this footage here actually looks pretty good. Let me find a... Yeah, let's use this one. So this clip's kind of... Yeah, we'll just use this one. So this clip's kind of flat because of the sun coming through, but a lot of times cameras that are shooting in log, it does look really flat, but there's actually a lot of data and a lot of information there that can be pulled back. So what you'll do is you'll go into the inspector, and I'm just using the general view. You can switch between these if you don't see the camera LUT option. But when you see camera LUT, you're able to select what LUT you want to use, or again, what lookup table you want to use. And they have some built-in ones for very specific cameras that are working with Apple and creating these. So if you are shooting and it says it recommends using a Canon log setting, you can go over here and click on Canon log, and it adjusts the camera, essentially adjusts the footage based on that lookup table. So again, this was shot on an iPhone, so none of these are going to look good. But if I switch between them, even the RE log, you can see how the color is massively changed, and that'll show night and day differences with things. And you could search using a LUT, and it'll on YouTube or somewhere else, you'll see a bunch of demos of this. So that's one way that LUTs are used inside of Final Cut, is for a camera-based essentially log conversion, converting from log recorded video to more of a presentable footage. And you can go in and add custom LUTs and put those in there as well if you have a custom camera or setting. The other way, let's go in here, search LUTs. I believe we had, maybe it's under custom. Oh, I'm in transitions. Of course, I got to be in effects. In the effects browser, if you search LUT, there's an option here to apply a custom LUT. So there's a difference between doing this. Doing it in the inspector is applying a very specific camera LUT. So if you got a camera, they say, hey, we have LUTs on our website, download them, install them, or use one of the built-in ones, do it that way. But otherwise, usually when people ask me about LUTs, they're talking about a custom LUT that's really just for stylizing the video. It's almost like applying a color correction to video. And that's what you're going to do here. You're going to go into the effects browser. You can do a search for LUT, and then drag this custom LUT onto the clip that you've put in there. You're going to see no change because you have to go up into the video inspector under custom LUT and select the LUT you want to use. So I don't have any LUTs on this computer, but you can go in here. You're going to say choose the LUT that you just downloaded off the web or wherever you got it from, and then it's going to apply that LUT. In this case, I'm inputting Rec 709 color spaced video. If your camera or the clips that you have were shot with Rec 2020 or 2020 PQ or another one of these settings, select that. But I could select Rec 709 and I'm converting it to maybe Rec 2020, or I want to stay in 709 color space. I can do that as well. If you don't know what any of the color spaces is, all that is, chances are you don't have to worry about it. But that is how you go in through and apply a custom LUT. So the person initially said, which LUT should I use? And unfortunately, I'm not going to give you an answer that's probably what you want to see, because you probably want to say, I'm going to say, hey, use this one specific LUT. But here's the problem with that. If it's a camera-based LUT that you're looking for, which again, if you go in the info inspector and select camera LUT, you want to select the one that's specific to your camera. So that's my first thing. If you have a camera that's shot in log, usually it's going to be log, shot in log, find the LUT that is specific to that camera or that variation of what you shot and the type of video that you recorded. Almost all companies at this point, newer companies coming out, are creating their own variations of this. So that's the first part of it. Check with the company of the camera, or where can you get your own custom LUTs? I don't have a favorite site, but some out there that I've seen, and none of these are sponsoring this channel. I don't have any reason to recommend these sites. I've just seen they've created good content, so I would say go and check these out. They may have LUTs that work for you. But a few of the ones that I've seen that you can download are pixelfilmstudios.com. The other one is filtergrade.com. We saw this one earlier, motionvfx.com, and coremelt.com. All of those, I believe all four of those, you can also find just by doing a web search for custom LUTs. They're some of the most popular, and there's tons of LUTs on there. Most of them have free packages you could download. Others are going to have paid ones as well. And there's also many individual creators that have created their own custom LUTs, and they have them available either through Facebook and they're sharing them, or maybe they have a website where they're sharing them. So a lot of those Facebook groups, people ask that question, and then people will respond with all their various posts of where to get things. So to summarize, apply a camera LUT through the inspector for your camera, or search the web for custom LUTs and try them out using the custom LUT effect, which is based in the color area here. And then my final thing for this post is learn color correction. A lot of people use LUTs in replacement of color correction. But custom LUT is in this color category because it is color correction. I mean, that's just what a lot of people use it for. So learn these other color correction tools. Use the color inspector, the color correctors here, whether it be the color board or the color wheel. Because instead of setting a custom LUT, you can go into these tools and fairly quickly you can go through and make adjustments that are going to look way better than any LUT that you might go and get for a custom LUT. And you have way greater control usually using the color correction here. So I understand it takes time and it's not the easiest thing to learn. So that's why LUTs are a nice kind of way to get around it. But if you can learn color correction, it takes a long time to learn and to master, but it is very powerful when you can do that. So I've got 2 more questions here coming to the end. Again, if you do have anything else, don't hesitate to put it in the chat. But this question is, I can't save a video from Final Cut and send it to my iPhone. Should I get Compressor? If you don't know, Compressor is an app similar to Motion. It's kind of like an add-on app that Apple makes for converting video, essentially for recompressing or compressing video a certain way. And when you go into Compressor, you can see what's new. You can see a whole feature list. Compressor is used for things like working with raw footage, but you can also use it to encode things in batches. So it's now 64-bit, which means it can run pretty fast. You can add closed captions just like you can in Final Cut. Do some configurations. You have all these different formats that you can convert video into. I'm not going to talk about Compressor here, but you could do that in Compressor. And when the person said that I can't get it to my iPhone, I can't send it to my iPhone, why can't I get it there? Well, ideally, the steps that I showed earlier in this stream are going to allow you to send those clips out. So ideally, you'll be able to airdrop them out after using the share to master file. That should work. And I don't know what other setting you might have been using to share out, but that probably was causing the issue. So just make sure to share it as a master file and then use AirDrop to send it over your phone, or use iTunes to go in and sync it. You could do it either wirelessly or with a cable using iTunes. So you should not need Compressor unless the issue is with storage on your iPhone. Maybe your iPhone's full and it can't take a full quality 2 or 3 gigabyte or larger file. And if that's the case, really you want to try to figure out storage on your phone. Delete some files to clear off space, because AirDrop, iTunes, or even sharing through iCloud to get the files on your phone with like a Sync Desktop or the Files app, those are the ways that you should be able to get your file over to the iPhone. And then our last question for today, unless I see another one pop up, is can we directly save libraries on an external hard drive? Great question. Very simple. Yes. Right now, this stock library, is being edited off an external hard drive. If I right-click on it and say Reveal in Finder, like I did before, you can see here's that library at the bottom. I have the path bar. And this stock library is saved on my external storage drive, which is just a rated external hard drive, or set of external hard drives. So yes, you can definitely save your library to an external hard drive. When you do in Final Cut here, when you go up to File, New Library, if you're creating a new library, in your little window that pops up here, just select that external storage and you can save it right there. Nothing wrong with that. If you've already created the library and you want to move it to the external hard drive, you can do that as well. So actually, let me create a new library, and I'm just going to call this our external tests library. I'm going to save it into the movies folder. Hit save. That's usually where those untitled libraries go. And usually when you're moving it, I recommend quitting Final Cut. So I'm going to quit out of Final Cut. I'm going to do Command-N to bring up a new Finder window. Shift-Command-H to go to the home folder, which I'm in here. I'm going to hit the movies folder. Just double-click on it. And here's my external test library. I'm using the gallery view. Let's switch over, maybe see one that you're more familiar with, column view or list view, either one. But here's our external test library. And I'm going to go up to view and say show the path bar. Option Command P, but the path bar at the bottom here shows us this is stored on Macintosh HD. So if you wanted to move this off of the internal drive onto an external drive after it was already created, you can do that. Just drag it over to the external storage. It's going to copy that to the external drive, and then you can delete the one off your current computer. You can certainly go in and copy it as well. Command C, go to your external drive, and then go up to Edit. And there's an option here that says Paste Item. If you hold Option, it'll say Move Item here. You can also do that, and it's going to then move it over. So I already had one there. I'll just say Replace. So now it's here inside of the external drive. And this happened almost instantly because I don't have any footage in it. If there's a lot of media, it may take some time to copy those things over. If I do Shift Command H to go back to my home folder, I'm going to click on Movies. Notice that thing is gone. So again, just to recap, can we directly save libraries on an external hard drive? Yes. When you create it, just choose to save it on that external hard drive. And then, or if you're using the Finder, you can use that to move that library over if you want to as well. So that is kind of what I had here for the stream. Let me switch over to my chat here. Looks like we're good on the chat. I'll just change it to live. Yeah, looks like we're all good there and caught up, which is awesome. So let me switch back over to the keynote, and we'll wrap up here on the stream for this month. Really packed. We're just over about 2 hours long with the demo and the Q&A. So it was a longer one, but there's definitely still more to learn. So some additional resources that I always like to remind you of inside of Final Cut. Don't hesitate to go up to that help menu. You can learn a lot from that and search things. I've also written an awesome guide to Final Cut Pro 10, available on the Apple Bookstore, Amazon through Kindle, and a couple other stores. So if you want to learn, that one covers version 10.3, so not the newest features, but definitely getting you up and running. That's a book out there if you like to read. And then I do recommend sharing at Final Cut Pro Help. This is not so much for you to learn, but just send this out to your friends and to people who you think might benefit from learning more about Final Cut. This is how I create the content. I create videos for you based on people's feedback. So like today's stream was all about Instagram sharing because we've been receiving so many questions about that. So if you can share this out to more people and then they can give feedback, then we can be able to get you the best videos and exactly what you're looking to learn about. Final Cut Pro Help, at Final Cut Pro Help, that username you can find right here on YouTube. We're also on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, basically all the social media spots. We're also on Pinterest as well now. You can find us all over the place for those, or you can always email finalcutprohelp@me.com. And finally, the website is anawesomeguide.com. This month, the month of January, this past month, we started posting a weekly review or kind of summary of what happened related to Final Cut that week. Most of it is going to be a summary of the shortcut posts, any YouTube videos that went up, and sometimes news. If there's something exciting happening, like in January, Apple actually came to Los Angeles, came to the Creative Pro user group, and demoed the new version of Final Cut for us. So we're able to see those features spoken directly from Apple. And that, for me, is news around Final Cut. Those are the kind of things I like to summarize. And awesomeguide.com, you can go into the blog there and see those posts and read about that. So that's what I had for you today. It was a long video today, but hopefully learning a lot of stuff with this episode of Final Cut Pro Help Live, which was episode 11. Next month is going to be March 1st. It'll represent a year that this show has been going. Very excited to get to episode 12 then. But again, this is creating content and sharing to Instagram. Thank you so much for watching. If there are any remaining questions, don't hesitate. Leave a comment on this video or send an email to finalcutprohelp@b.com. You can find us on Instagram and all those places. So just follow. I hope you enjoy. And until next month, have a wonderful rest of your February.